Charles Wyplosz joins us from Boston, Massachusetts, usually in Geneva, Switzerland, but we do welcome him and his expertise, of course, on the European economy. Let me start with your textbook, which is sold a gajillion copies in Europe. If you rewrote the textbook now on fiscal economics in Europe, how would you rewrite it, Professor?
Well, I'm rewriting it at this very time. I mean, nothing fundamental has changed, but we've discovered the perils of accumulating debts and not really taking action about that.
Let's look at a recent op-ed, and Professor Wyplosz, folks, way out in front on this debate through Project Syndicate and other areas. This from, I'm going to kill this professor, Finanz und Wirtschaft. Rex just fell off his chair laughing in the control room. I'm sorry, I blew that. Here we go. The euro under Greek light. The unofficial reason for ECB involvement was to protect large country banks, which had been bailed out a little before at very high political costs. Now that policymakers realize the cake is too big to be swallowed. Where are we right now, Professor? Are we in the business of continuing to bail out European commercial banks?
Yes, I think the situation now is getting where I feared it would get, namely it's getting out of hand. As you said, today is a quiet day, so it's a lull before the storm. Tomorrow, the European Banking Authority will release the results of the stress test. The stress test will probably get most banks out of trouble officially, but without factoring in a large default on public debts in Europe. So that will start triggering anguish. Then the Italian parliament is supposed to vote a new budget, but this budget is simply alarming the market. So everything is coming into place for trouble, possibly next week or within 2 weeks at most.
Well, within 2 weeks at most. Here's an important question. Gauge those stress tests versus what we remember in the United States and the very weak stress tests in Europe before. Is this time different for stress tests in Europe?
We'll have to see exactly what they have done. The European Banking Authority, the new authority, has been struggling to have more severe tests than last year. Last year it was recognized as a joke.
Yes.
So the new authority wants them tougher, but I don't think they are nearly tough enough to convince the market.
Are they as tough as the United States stress tests of, I'm guessing, 18 months ago?
No, not. I mean, the real question is, do we assume there is a serious default on a serious public debt? And we'll have to see. But the information that we have so far is that there is nothing of that sort in the stress test. And that comes at a time when the huge, enormous Italian public debt comes into focus.
Professor Wyplosz, I've had the privilege of reading Jean-Charles Rochet of the University of Toulouse on banking crisis. And Professor Rochet, at the end of his book, will really suggest this is a political mess and requires a political solution. Do you see any change in the politics of Europe that will lead to a political solution away from what good economic academics would say?
Well, I think the politicians have been playing a waiting game for the last year or so. And doing that, they have actually made the situation much worse. So far we were playing with small countries, so these debt levels were almost manageable. Now with Italy, we are completely changing the situation.
Earlier this morning on Bloomberg Radio, folks, excuse me, Bloomberg Television with Margaret Brennan, Martin Feldstein of Harvard spoke. Here's what he had to say about the European debt crisis.
If you ask my best guess, it is that the ECB will give in the end, that they will say that sovereign bonds of Greece, no matter whether there's a technical default or not, are going to be acceptable as collateral. And once that happens, then the pieces can fall together to make that deal work.
And there's Professor Feldstein with In Business's Margaret Brennan. Charles Wyplosz, you hear Professor Feldstein there. He's been almost as gloomy as you. I mean, you've outgloomed Martin Feldstein. But the idea here of the immediacy, what should the ECB do, is the lead institution in Europe. What should they do this weekend?
Okay, I think we are now in a situation where we are indeed in the hands of the ECB. The Italian debt is too big for the other governments to bail out the Italian government, and only the ECB has the means to print the money that it takes to prevent the collapse of the Italian debt. So what I expect the ECB to do in the very, very near future is to announce that they stand by the Italian public debt, that they are ready to bail out the Italian government. Well,
I want to bring up Italy-German spread here right now. Wyplosz considers Italy. Is Italy a peripheral nation, Professor?
No. Italy is no periphery. Italy is in the core. It's in the initial founding member country of the European Union. It's a major country in terms of size, and it's a major country in terms of public debt.
I want to go right now. Alan Ruskin in the note, if you would, please. Here it is. Troubles brewing at the core, unlike with the old, think early 70s ERM. It's a note of the day where main currency adjustments were taking place intra-ERM, that's at regional community. The current system only allows for nominal foreign exchange adjustments versus currencies outside the EMU. I thought nicely stated by Alan Ruskin. Professor, are we really at threat what we've worked on for 40 or 50 years within Europe? This is a fascinating question. Where are we going to be in 5 years?
I'd love to know. I think, yes, there is a threat. The threat, I don't see it coming from economics or financial events. The monetary union is a very sturdy construction. The threat is political. The threat is that populist government might pop up and push one or two or three countries out of the monetary union. They would withdraw on their own will because of political turmoil. That's the threat. That's not immediate, of course.
Let's bring up the op-ed of the day. Thanks to Max Burley and Bloomberg View for bringing this to us. Reinhardt and Rogoff, see it at Bloomberg View, Bloomberg.com. This is wonderful. Historical experience and early examination of new data suggests the need to be cautious about surrendering to their wonderful book, This Time is Different, and decreeing the surging government debt isn't as significant a problem. Professor Wyplosz, how do you respond to politicians who say this time is different? How do you respond to that?
Well, I respond by saying just wait and see what's happening. The politicians have been trying to avoid this moment of truth, and it's coming, and that's the best answer that they can get, is you can't ignore fundamental economic principles.
Let's leave it there. Professor, thank you so much. Wyplosz and Berta, one of the great textbooks of Europe.